right, so welcome all to the December 9th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission meeting. We're meeting in the trailer in a hybrid format. So we have all commissioners present except for Commissioner Levitt, and no commissioners online. So you won't have to just vote by roll call. The meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Anyone online that wishes to speak, raise your hand, please direct any comments to the chair. Are there any comments or concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. Are there any comments or concerns with the minutes from November 18th? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have to ratify the warrants of November 19th and December 3rd. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion on the two warrants? None, how do you vote?
Aye.
Passed unanimous. Is there any public comment?
Nothing.
No one on there, so we'll move on to pending leases and contracts set forth on exhibit 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. It's always a pleasure. Have a great Thanksgiving. Moving down the list, the first one is actually Hagedorn Aviation Winter 8. It's a lease, new lease agreement. However, within the last couple of hours, we've had some questions actually surrounding the term of this lease, and we feel that we're going to need to move this one to next month. Unfortunately, we're going to change on the exhibit, so that one we're going to forego. So moving on. With Tradewind, this is a lease extension on a month-to-month basis. As you are aware, they are renting out of the flat roof building that we have currently. However, we're trying to get the RFP out on the streets in the next week. It should be public. And so they've asked if they could stay in there month to month as they're trying to go year round. And we don't see that as an issue. We'll continue operating until the RFP is done. And then whoever the new person is going to take over, they'll swap out regardless of whoever gets that RFP. So that's what this is just a lease extension on a month-to-month basis. For the next one, with Stowe Enterprises, also known as Fresh Air Services, this is for their annual business fee they do aircraft cleaning services and security screenings for Slate Aviation, just an annual. There, moving down, the Johnson Controls Fire Protection is just statewide contract to your services for them to come and do the elevator inspections, fire alarms, inspections. Next one is Anderson and Krieger. This is for legal services and general matters. It's the year-to-year agreement that we have in place. Next one is for 1200 Aero. This is the new programming that would allow them to build for APU runtime on the land for us to monitor noise and give us a better understanding of which aircraft are running longer than the 15 minutes that we have for our plant management plan. This is a great opportunity for us to really track just running APUs and noise sensitive areas for the abutters that are next to the airport. And the last one here is the task order with McFarland Johnson. This is in relation to the concrete hard stands at Gate 2 Alpha. And yeah, with that being said, I ask for motion to approve these, of course, minus the one for added on which we remove.
Any questions or discussion on exhibit 1? The other thing I would add on the 1200 Aero, I think yes, is a noise component, but I think there's also an emissions component to the running. That's very important.
We monitor the emissions or the time?
Simply by monitoring the time, I think in terms of it's not only noise, I think they're a big component to related to anything from standing from time. So other thing, Ryan, can you join us?
Apologies, traffic was a bear.
We were just about to vote on exhibit 1. Did you have any questions, comments, or concerns on the pending leases and contracts that you'd like to bring up?
I did not. The only question I had was, it looks like the noise software is back on. I know you were going to look at some alternatives. Should we assume that the alternatives did not work out?
That is correct. We reached out to multiple firms and nobody has been able to match or see anything of that nature. That is correct.
And also, just because I asked the same question, X Warren didn't provide that as an option. Those would have been nice. That was one I was sort of hoping. But they explored it. So if there's no further questions or concerns, is there a motion to approve the pending leases, contracts, agreements on exhibit one?
So move.
For a second. Second. Motion made and seconded. How do you vote?
Aye.
Unanimously, thank you. That will take us on to the discussion on jet fuel.
Jet fuel, couple of just items to hit right here. Per World Fuel, they're getting ready to swap out our leased 5K fueler. They'll bring us a 7,000 gallon truck. That should be happening there within the next week or two, and then we should have delivery around March. Same with the other 3 remaining 7,000 trucks that we had requested. We've informed them of the dates that we need them. And I know Preston's been working diligently on getting those sooner than later. So we're looking good for the new season to have those new trucks. I also received some correspondence from Robert B. Auer in relation to the future barge operations. He informed me that there is a vote to use the Steamship Authority slip in the works really soon, and the intent is to be able to utilize their operation by the end of the first quarter of next year. They can move freight with their tug and barges without any additional licensing. He definitely wanted to meet with me to discuss more in person. I gave him a couple of dates to meet this week and next week, and I'm just willing to get back. I'd like to continue that conversation with Robert B. Howard. But that's all that I had with any updates as it pertains to the jet fuel this time.
So, there's an idea of that?
Well, we have a few ideas, but I think there's a big picture here that I've worked on. I think I'd like to see us have a committee so that we can define the idea down. I did a lot of work this week. Other commissioners done a lot of work this week and over the last month, and we have a lot of different options that I think we should kind of like boil down before we just come in there and spend a lot of time on. And I think we should have a subcommittee to do that. What else? I could share some of them if you like.
No, I think that's fine. I think the last few meetings, we've spent a lot of time on it. But you know, maybe it's clear that there are some detailed nuances to really try to figure out a recommended path forward. And if we had a subcommittee that put that time in and made recommendations, we would then have a more refined discussion at the commission level, I think, from that perspective. And so if everybody was amenable, I guess I would say that we could appoint a subcommittee as a jet fuel, or maybe we even say fuel instead of just jet fuel. Really, we want to add gas into any discussion. You know, we want to, I think, look at it in aggregate, everything that is related to airport fuel supply and resale, and so have that as a subcommittee. We could either look at it within the context of our existing committees, or we could appoint a new subcommittee. I think would be fine. That committee will be subject to the open meeting law, and we'll need to post its meetings and have minutes, but I think it would be fine if you held those, you know, maybe in the, for, right, you know, for having the staff there, and if not the public, it's publicly accessible, and whoever the subcommittee is could decide that, but it will still be subject to, you know, if Warren feels to provide the staff for the minutes for that and the posting of the agendas. And that way there, any commissioners that are not on the subcommittee would still be free to attend, you know, because they may want to. And so I guess we'd open it up for who might be interested to be on that subcommittee. Subcommittee of 2.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm happy to do it as well, but I don't need to be if you guys want to try to work it out. And then I'm always available. I can do it if you guys thought that, you know, there was a meeting like that you guys that works for you guys, and I think that's a good path forward. So we can agree.
I'm not in business.
So, okay, well, why don't we? thank you
Mr.
both
Chair.
For that, yeah.
What about the voting? Do you need a quorum for it? If
No,
the subcommittee will be
no,
only
you can
two?
have subcommittees of two. That's fine, and it's just gonna be a recommendation, and then unless it would have to be.
There'd be no votes in it, right?
Yeah, it's a, right, so it's only to make, it's an advisory subcommittee. I think is the way that I would look at it, that, the work group. Is advisory to the commission so that it be more efficient in data collection. And working with staff instead of tying up, all the staff time, you guys probably decide through Warren. Who to have involved and whatever you need, and then see if we can come up with recommendations related to. I have to think we should kind of quickly just go over, it's gonna probably be a rehashing of what we've discussed the last couple of meetings, storage versus transport, supply. Perhaps as we're considering pricing structure recommendations as part of that. Overall fuel management, a lot of which is already done. There's obviously the big upgrade with the dashboard and stuff but wrapping that all together to come up, and then perhaps it's a question of whether there's a need for more formalized policy or whether it's simply management guidelines or, suggested infrastructure improvements, service contracts, whatever it might be. That's what I would envision, but you guys have any other ideas? I think it's pretty wide for charge. Right?
I think not to, restrict us going in as to what we should be looking at, but if we take the broad
Yeah.
subject of fuel, both the supply and sales and everything in between.
Great.
And all we're really going to do is come back with some recommendations to the full commission. And, as we're digging into things, we may trip over some other options that we don't even know about today.
Yep. That's sort of, I was thinking, supply and resale, and it's all things fuel and gas and. Sounds good. So,
And so, like, obviously, we'd like to have, questions as part of this.
again, I would work through Warren, whoever you got, however you guys wanna,
Yep. Because we could use some help from financing.
Whatever,
We talked about a little bit earlier.
I think. With Warren's support, he's accountable, the guys could just work together through that, report back when you're ready. And we'll probably take it off the agenda at this point until the subcommittee asks for it to be on the agenda, if that makes sense.
And how much the lead time do you need for that to happen?
So the 48 hours, but
Okay.
usually a week in advance, we
Yeah.
have sort of an agenda setting, so. But as long as it's within 48 hour business hours, then we would need a posting requirement to put it on there, but as you can, so.
I'd like to make the point that unless Warren's been made Preston available, I'm not interested in doing it because this is.
All
the experience.
right, I think the points
It's well qualified.
made, so.
Well qualified.
Yeah, let's see what we can do to, put a finer point on this and make some improvements. It's a good time to be working on it. Great, thank you both. I think if there's nothing further on jet fuel, we will move on to pending matters in PFAS.
Perfect. With PFAS, just have a real quick update here. So we had one home hookup, 83 Skyline's now been connected. We still have 2 more homes we have quotes for, just waiting for the contractor to start the work. And then the remaining 5 homes, we're just waiting on quotes. Weston is planning on coming out between January 12th through the 15th to install 4 new monitoring wells in the runway 15 approach area, as well as the Sun Island area.
Yeah, questions? Anyone wants to add? Crew quarters.
Crew quarters, I've been working real diligently with legal, just on how to proceed. As it pertains first, the SW poll, really just working on the best approach with how to resolve this invoice. They've advised me to reach out to SW poll. This unfortunately was late last night when they advised me to do that. So I'm planning on reaching out to them tomorrow and discussing further, but I should have pretty much a resolution by that AirCom meeting. As it relates, relation to the AMP service issues, they have also, legal's asked for the original RFP, the bid pricing, original designs, drafts, along with just any meeting minutes and emails, just to get us, to build that solid understanding of what the board plan of communication is. And Arthur and I, we've actually been feeding them. We built a SharePoint site and been sharing with them all these documents. And so just due to the limited time that we had from last AirCom meeting and the Thanksgiving holiday, they just asked to just be a little bit more patient with them as they review all these documents. So that's the best answer I got for an update of the third quarter right now. So more to come there, but we're getting close.
Right, so we'll keep that on for the January meeting. Was there anything anyone wants to add for tonight or see what they'll put up with?
Yeah, just to make sure we're addressing all the issues, right, such as that, was the give back on the service size. If it was supposed to be done within the original bid, was it bid that way? And if it was actually put in at 600, then where's the give back on that as they're looking for money for a disconnect, right? Did all the plumbing on the floor get put in? And I'm like, and you had mentioned something, you know, about the window walls. I didn't even realize they were all facing out. I mean, I thought this stuff, I don't understand all. I have no idea how this all happened.
There's a
Very
breakdown
troubling.
in communication as to the expected level of preparation of the basement, and that's what I think we need to.
Yeah, we totally agreed not to build it out now, but it was, all this infrastructure was supposed to be put in, so we could build it out, and when we get to that point.
That was the commission's position.
100%.
Now, we're trying to figure out, I think, where in other, you know, where is it that it says that it was to be done differently? That, and that's what we want to chance to provide, but I've yet to see that. But
Well, I feel like there's more to come back to us if this wasn't done the right way, right?
Well,
With the
we're-
plumbing and
we're
the
not
floor, that's a
ready.
huge number to go back and try to redeem it.
or window well, egress wells, like they're not just
Right,
window
those too.
wells, or the
Yeah.
egress wells, and there's. Right, the concept that was agreed on by the commission was clearly that, we were taking out the petitions. You know, and any kind of finishes, but that it would be ready for a flooding. You know, I'm disappointed because I was ready to move forward with that project to try to get us another. You know, unit, or additional rooms, if there was gonna be complications related to. It being a standalone. Unit, which, you know, a certain number of dwelling units, those other thresholds, then maybe we would have decided it would just be more bedrooms. But he's getting to do that now. With the way you still need egress wells and they put the HVAC there, and so we're trying to get, I hope that. They just need some, that, those are the questions that have been put to, at this point, I feel like. Fortunately, we have to spend the money on legal to sort through that. At least to try to figure it out. Yeah,
I had a couple of notes here that we had discussed at previous meetings that we were going to do some follow-up on relating to them. One was the question of, was irrigation in the contract? And somebody was supposed to be looking at
It
that.
was not.
Okay. Did we agree upon what the completion date was and when the daily liquidated damages kick in? Or are we gonna take the position that it's still not complete if this other work hasn't been done?
And that's been brought up with legal, and they're still trying to understand. Yeah, they haven't given me a straight answer, because we know that the completion date was July 24th, if I'm correct, because Pearl did ask for a change order that was approved to extend that date.
right, and that was the last November,
Correct.
that it was, for all purposes, it was like August 1st, basically, that last week, end of July, but I think, yeah, you know. The understanding was delivered. I think that the issuance of a temporary certificate of occupancy. Adds a layer there that. You know, what's the definition of delivery if you. Are issued temporary, this certificate of occupancy, that kind of makes things, I think, perhaps more challenging for our business owners. With the rate advantages, but.
Well, I would think there's well settled contract law as to whether a TCO meets the standard that our lawyers should be able to tell us.
Yeah, part of it is starting to use the building to
When were we in the building?
that second week of.
August one?
Yeah, well, somewhere around about that,
Yeah.
whether everything was done or not, so that makes that position of things maybe not as clear. So I think on that aspect, the bigger issue becomes one of the design components and installation for the basement. Most of what we've seen to date has been that what was installed was per the plans. What might have been changed or not, I think when and where that change happened is not quite clear.
Are Anderson and Krieger assigned to take a look at the contract?
Correct,
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
This is a $500 an hour operation, you know, once you let the lawyers start running, our liquidated damages get raised pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So, I don't know if we have a budget on the lawyers, but, they can run us right out of town.
yeah, there's an aspect of that of if we're spending money to chase down answers that may not really get us anywhere, but I think we, on a limited basis, should understand how things went, off in the wrong direction to be sure that we can improve our overall operation, right? That doesn't happen again if we're into looking at other projects.
Do we have a budget on Anderson Krieger, or they're just spinning the wheels?
No.
They're just spinning.
It's a general service.
Yeah.
I've been very happy with their services, but they've been very
Yeah.
fair, I agree. Yeah. There's only one attorney on this for what it's worth. Some of the other stuff, there's multiples.
Yeah, a lot of times they have like, it's not, but.
Yeah, I think we have, I think to, Mr. Barron's point there. When you have something like this that is, and I've tried digging through it, so it takes time. It's not clear. Like there's not a solid paper trail the way you would hope that there is. And there's been changeover in our own management, there's been changeover in our own as project manager. I don't know where we come out on it, except to maybe have an understanding of how to improve things going forward, and then understand what might need to be done in order to use the basement as we intended, which is gonna be that much more expensive and challenging. Whatever it might be, or it's back to that it's, because that's the whole point. Where do we build that big retaining wall for the light? It's just storage area, right? We would have, we ended up with a hybrid, right? We ended up with a hybrid of what we wanted, so hopefully not all is lost, and there is some way that, but I don't think we're gonna be starting from the position we hoped we were gonna be in. But I think, and again, and I agree, I think if we can't get this figured out by the next meeting, we don't wanna just keep going around and around a little bit, but hopefully, so far it hasn't been. It hasn't been clear. It's simply asking PM to provide the information.
They seem to be, they don't know whether they're stolen.
They've had a lot of changeover too. I just think that.
Well,
it's-
we shifted. We have the contract, so everything.
So that's what so again, I started to like, it's a rabbit hole of. So that's what we're paying lawyers to dig through, because we have them, yes, and we've got them, and that's what one was saying, we've uploaded them, but where, and then a lot of the change orders. To try to track through where, but. What I've seen to date is that it goes back to. Before the issuance of the actual RFP documents, and then when the basement wasn't gonna be done, the design elements stopped. On the basement, but there was stuff that was already drawn, so like some of it just stayed, but then they didn't finish. A design. Now, where was it that there was a charge to design? That basement or not? Like, I think it's pre RFP. The documents didn't cover what they probably should have, at least that's the best that I've been able to figure out. And whether, we were supposed to catch a notice, that I understand that. Like, did you have more on that?
No, but I agree with Tony that we should wind this up, but, part of the vernacular, if those guys were screwing us, I don't really want to let them get away with it because, it kind of sends a message as to what we would allow our next contractor to do.
Yeah, and I'd be careful. I don't know that it was a contractor. I think there's pieces of this that are related to the changes that happen quickly from one project to another, and while things are missed, and maybe there's, responsibility there, whether it's designer, PM, contractor, ourselves. That's what I see there.
And this is not the first go around we've had in construction. When I got on the board, we were faced with about an $850,000 claim by the contractor that built the FBO building. And, we went through a long discussion about how to handle that. We mediated it and we went to Boston and we mediated that for $350, which was a good result. It was just throwing mud up against the wall, but we got a thing done. You can't litigate these contracts. The concept of quantum merit means that the contractor is always going to get paid if they did the work. And arguing the contract is useless. And the details in these construction cases are unbelievable. Everybody knows how complicated it is to build one of these buildings. And we don't want to get involved in discussion of that. At $500 an hour, our legal fees are going to kill us. So.
But what is frustrating is we are forced by the municipal regulations to hire an OPM.
Yeah.
And the idea of hiring an OPM is that they're working for us and protecting us.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have to worry about the contractor.
Yeah.
And they've taken quite a fee. And it may be that it's not the contractor that fell down on the job. They may have done what they were told to do. But the OPM, who should have been managing the project, in fact, wasn't.
Yeah.
And that may be with the liability lies.
Yeah.
And that's where we're looking at the paper trail of the law for change orders and to try to understand it from that perspective as well. So
We may just follow on.
we'll see. Let's talk about it at the next meeting and then maybe we have to go from there and then we'll see what we can do for the basement. So nothing further on that. We'll have more in January. Terminal optimization project.
For sure, yeah. Finally, the notice of funding opportunity was released late last night. I got the email about 10 o'clock last night. It gives us a January 15th deadline to submit a grant application for the terminal optimization. Just for context, this is the $1 billion grant for terminal expansion and improvements. It is the last installment of a 5-year ATP program. Our airport, of course, is a non-hub, non-primary airport. So we're entitled to the 90% grant assurance, with of course the state matching an additional 5 for this project. So we've already been working on the task order and scope for this project. I spoke with Rich Lasden this afternoon, yeah. And he said that it's done. He just wanted his team to review it one last time today, and then he'll send it my way for review, which then, of course, after it's reviewed by us, goes to the FAA for review, goes to the state of Massachusetts for review, aeronautics, and then, of course, out to an IFE. So we're moving along for this with this part. Once he's got the terminal aspect done, they're going to start with the geothermal here probably within the next couple of days as well. The geo and the scope for that. So we should be seeing that visually as well.
And they're gonna put them both in, but as 2 phases.
I think so, because I don't think the geothermal would be qualified for the NOFO for the ATP. I'd have to look at that, but I do believe there might be some assets where they have for the geothermal. So that's I think why we had to split it out as 2.
And you were gonna split it out as 2, but I wasn't clear, I guess, if we were gonna still put them both in.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. I got you now. Yeah. We want to put them together just to mitigate cost.
And then-
yes. Right. I got you. Yeah.
And so we have a meeting on the 13th. And it's due by the 15th, and we need a special meeting.
So the grant application is due by the 15th. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to have the task order done, but because we're on top of it, it just gives us some firepower. We got it done. We're basically showing the FAA we've got something shovel ready.
I think if you could, once that is done, you distribute that to the commission.
Absolutely.
And then we'll include it in the next packet, so it's available
Yep.
publicly. But once it's to that point, I mean, if anybody had any comments or concerns, then give them back to Warren directly, so. It gives everybody a chance to see the exact, or normally I think it would have been nice to see that. Before it's gonna go out, but we have had extensive discussions, I think we have a sense of where it's going, we've had it on the agenda a long time, but just that final version. It would be good that everybody could put eyes on it, just in case, and then we do have a meeting on the 13th, they will have a special meeting if needed, if there was. Some kind of level of concern, or if Rich had questions, I think he pretty much hammered that out with us. The last meeting that he asked for that direction, but just in case, it's so big, I just don't wanna. Have something misunderstood or go the wrong way, because they, were rushing, or, in fairness to them, or we're under such a tight timeline, I mean. Government's giving us 6 weeks. They hopefully are anticipating this. Puts us in a more advantageous position than other folks that maybe, weren't on standby for it. It's nationwide.
And we know that the vineyard, they put an application out for last year's, and they weren't expecting anything, and they got, what, 15 million?
15.
They did not have anything shovel ready, so they were rushing to get something done, which they did, kudos to them, so, yeah. We want to show that we're on top of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else on the terminal optimization?
We're on top of that.
Non-union personnel agreement.
But yeah, so I did distribute the non-union personnel agreement to all of you prior to this meeting for your review. Really, the majority of the updates around basic language and verbiage, along with health insurance plans updates that were seriously outdated. I think the last time the manual was approved was in 2006. But 2 of the specific updates are vacation time, which reflects what the town of Nantucket's vacation policy is. So it keeps us in line with town. As well as an increase in rollover of comp time from 50 hours to 75 hours for the main upgrades. Any questions you guys have with that?
Did anybody ever get a chance to look at it and any questions?
Where'd you get it?
That's
the reload of the old one?
yeah, so this is the old one, and it's just we made updates to it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
I think it was last updated 20 years ago, though, so it's been a while. Does that need to go to a motion for approval?
Yes.
Yeah, there's further questions. Is there a motion to adopt the new version of the non-union personnel agreement?
So moved.
Moved and seconded, any further discussion? And now how do we vote? Carries unanimously. Rates and charges.
Hopefully you got the handout for the rates and charges, but I think really I'd just like to open it up to have you guys done it in the past?
This is our initial discussion for what will be presented for the public hearing in January. So this is a chance for the commission to review the draft, raise any concerns, the commission to have a discussion about where our starting point might be. And then it's another bite at the apple and, refinement and any changes to be made in January based on input from the public and further discussion. But the idea was to try to get this so that the commission understands and is in agreement with what's going to be available for the public. We're going to advertise the public hearing, and then this document would be available for anybody that had would be interested in that public hearing. So with that, I think we want to run through the proposed changes to the current rates and charges, and then we can discuss any potential addendums or additions, subtractions.
Sure, yeah. I do believe that I think we all agreed it was a 3.5% increase, just to kind of put straight across the board. So starting with the first one's the landing fee there, that's just a straight 3.5%. Also,
Excuse me. Do you want to run through it and then take questions, or do you want to take questions as you hit each point?
Why don't you do it as we hit each point so that if we don't, feel free to jump in. Go ahead.
The 3.5% CPI that's the CPI for all urban wage across the country. Everybody knows that Nantucket operates differently. Our expenses, excluding catering, credit card fees, debt principal, and transfers to the general fund, increased 15.4% last year. So if the concept is to increase fees in line with our expense increase, then just looking to CPI doesn't really align with the increase in our expenses.
Where did you get that figure of 15%?
I'm happy to show you the financials that Maria puts out, that you can just go. What I did is I went down the expenses. I pulled out fuel cost, catering cost, credit card fees, debt principal, and the transfers to the general fund. Very, very simple work on looking at 24 and 25, and we can go back other years too. But it's basically our operating expenses, which covers all of the salaries and other expenses at the airport, except for what in a business you would consider really to be cost of goods sold.
Does staff have a sense of the annual rate of increase of that, you know, in line with that, or are there other factors that we should consider? I think it would be difficult to do a 15% across the board increase, but maybe it should be more than the 3.5. So I guess that's part of the initial discussion.
Commissioner Levitt, when you were doing your calculation, were you counting salaries and like Barnstable retirement and all of these, like health insurance, or you were looking just at the operating side of the budget?
I was looking at all of the salaries.
Oh, you were looking at everything.
Because, you know, as our salaries increase, that's an increased expense.
There will be big increase here compared, I mean, last year, so this, you were comparing the first quarter this year compared to the last quarter, or you were looking 12 months?
12 months, and I backed up the
24.
one-time items like the house purchase.
But you've 24 to 25.
Yes.
Because in 25, for example, we had a pretty big expense on salaries because we had at least 3 very long-term employees that they had a big payout once they left the airport. So maybe I would personally maybe try to back up those two to get a real percentage.
I'm happy to sit down and go with you. You know those numbers a lot better than I do, but
because
it's pretty clear that our expenses are increasing faster than the
CPI.
national CPI.
And I also just want to mention that it's standard, airport employees, they might step up based on their years of service and everything, but it's standard that it's usually the annual increases of salaries themselves are usually between 3 to 5%, depends. For the non-union employees, we follow what the union is getting, and currently it's 4%.
But I believe the headcount went up as well.
The headcount to employees, you mean?
Yes.
Yes, 2 people, yes.
Right, so that's an increased expense.
Yeah. I just want to point out that, just in general, it's not like employees are getting 10% every year.
I didn't imply that,
Yeah.
and our point about 15% seems like a pretty shocking number compared to 3.5. So maybe the number needs to be somewhere in between, but I think we should perhaps decouple from CPI and be more focused on what our expenses are actually increasing, which is if the concept of the fees are supposed to help recover our expense at the airport, then if the expenses are going up at a faster rate than CPI, then so should the fees.
Now, how does the fuel, we're proposing to increase our fuel costs by 50 cents a gallon, is that correct?
The fuel price is just at our discretion is how it works throughout the summer. So
That seems to be decoupled from the 3.5%. I mean, 50 cents. Yeah. On a $6.50 or $7 piece of fuel, that's about 8-9%.
I think on the fuel, that would go to the subcommittee there's a lot to that, and I think we also want to be careful as a competitive market in terms of, say, margin discussion that you have on that. But I do think it is decoupled from this. I think the fuel isn't related to. Unless you're figuring in, if you're looking solely at the expenses. And that was exactly my point of what I was looking to ask is where are the changes? So that addressed it perfectly between that discussion, right? I knew that the agreement that we had with the employees is greater than the CPI. So that in of itself is perfect nexus to why the rates of increase might be at that number. And then when you factor in the payouts, so that's a one time, but then you have the add-on of the fees. So we have to be sure that we again, the fees have to be related to the services provided. And if we're going to go at a higher rate than the CPI for the basis of across the board, the proper discussion would be what's the appropriate number for that to be.
And I just want to follow up to Tony's remark. That two pager that went around that talked about recommendations that included that 50-cent fuel thing. It should be clear that I sent that into the staff, so it isn't the staff's recommendation, but it was mine. And I believe that the way fees generally work at airports, fuel pricing and FBO services aren't really in here. That's kind of handled separately, and it sounds like we're going to have a subcommittee that's going to look at that. So that everything fuel related perhaps shouldn't be in this discussion here.
So as we look at the numbers to be adjusted by the CPI or alternate percentage, it's really going to be related to the aeronautical fees. And we should probably have a look at what that number is. I mean, there's also a bit of rounding, I think, that happens for ease of probably calculation and invoicing, I would think.
Yeah,
So,
that's correct. That's correctly.
did you have a recommendation other than what in between those two that you might think we should be considering on a percentage basis?
I just wanted to open it up for discussion and make the point that I think we should decouple from CPI because that doesn't really reflect the increased cost of operating here at Nantucket and at the airport, because the airport, as it expands or offers additional services, its expenses may go up or someday go down. So I just think that CPIW, or the national CPI, that takes into account the costs in Kansas City as well as New York City, really don't reflect our costs here. So we should find some other barometer of what the cost differential should be. And it may be that if we've been just increasing its CPI for a number of years, we may need to ease into another metric so that it isn't such a shockingly high increase.
Is there any federal obstruction or problem with raising more than the CPI? In other words, the feds they pay us for doing the same thing. If we say we're putting everything up 15%, is somebody in the FAA is gonna show up or a doorstep and ask questions about that?
I believe from my past experience, it's more likely to be an airport user. During a public hearing that's raising an objection, and then they would have as a more but for there, I believe is a appeal process to the FAA of our rates and charges if it was to be contested. So that is a basis that to the point of a reasonable nexus of the charge that you have to be able to support. That it can't just be the sky as the limit. Now we've generated a basis of why it might be more like the 5. I think it's very clear that it would be more than the 3.5 simply on the basis of that's what we've agreed to for personnel expense increases exceed that, and we've hired additional personnel, and you could just take that one piece alone to justify a greater number. You know, as we move this around, I'm wondering if 5% might be a number for this year to start off a movement from, the CPI, but stays within a realm of fully defensible. And it's, again, I think it's important that the public and the users of the airport understand that the effort is for us not to turn profit, but to maintain operation in the black and be able to support the needs and projects that the airport has also coming. So that's, I think that maybe that number is somewhere reasonable. So
I'm curious how you, like, you made a comment about separating fuel from this number, but all the people that pump the fuel and all that stuff's kind of commingled in the number, right? So when you talk about salaries, it's all the salaries, or I'm just curious how you do.
We do
Cause I
not,
like
pay-
separate things out, like to each group, each part of the company, so I can track like where all the, what everything costs. I don't know, I'm not sure if you can do that. as well.
we purchase all our fuel from the fuel revolver, which is separate of our operating budget. So when Commissioner Levitt was looking into it, that's why he wasn't including it, because he was looking only in our
But the
operating side.
expenses relative to the sale of the fuel are not, they are still part of this, so.
Well, we purchase the fuel from the revolver. If you mean like professional services, anything related to the fuel farm, that's part of our operating budget.
Part of this,
but I think
Yes.
you mean,
Yeah, but
my
paying the
point
person
is-
to pump the fuel.
right?
Oh, yeah,
So all
That's
those
operating.
expenses can't be in this either then, if you're gonna do it that way. I feel like if you're gonna pull how you pay for the fuel and all the income from the fuel, you're gonna take just the fuel itself and put it over here. You can't, yeah, you gotta take all the expenses relative to that. You gotta propose all over there. So then this is more clean to say, this is really what we're trying to pay for. It's just the operation of the FBO, not the fuel drivers and all that kind of stuff, right? And the tank farm and all those expenses. If we're gonna do it that way, you have to split it that way.
Right, but Phil, if what, I agree with what you're talking about, that we should allocate expenses to departments and understand what they cost. But if you're going to take out the personnel that are pumping the fuel, and all of the other expenses related to fuel sales, you would take them out in both years, in 24 and 25. And since all that we're talking about is what's the percent increase, you can take them off both sides. And my guess is you would still see a percentage increase of roughly the same. You know, it isn't, for instance, that we have people that are pumping fuel and their salaries went up by a higher percent than the people that are doing maintenance on the airport, for instance.
I understand what you're saying. I think what I'm saying though is if you're gonna, I think you have to take the whole, you either have to look at the whole picture together or you have to look at it in parts. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think you just can say, oh, we're just gonna take the expense of the fuel and put that over there. We're not gonna talk about that because you have to look at the expense of fuel and the income from the fuel. And that's somehow how sometimes you do other things to offset those costs, right? With that, because you have more money in that or to do that. I'm not saying you're wrong and that the increases are exceed what we're trying to increase the fees, but I'm not saying that. They totally agree with it.
I want to follow up also on something that Tony said about, or questioning whether the FAA or somebody else might look at whether it's a 15% increase or a 5% increase. If we take a look at what our fees are and benchmark them against other airports in the region, one normally thinks that everything on Nantucket is more expensive, especially this airport. And we are the least expensive airport. And I'm not sure that we want to position ourselves as the discount airport in the region to fly into. So any increase that we have in our fees, if they're brought up, somebody is not going to be able to say, well, you are 5%, 50% more expensive than other similar airports. We're actually less, even with a substantial fee increase. So I think we have plenty of cover as to whether they're fair and reasonable.
Also, FA, I know, I don't think that they have a problem with the fees unless you are discriminating. Like Massport big case with Massport where they decided they didn't want small airplanes, so they charged them huge fees. It has to have some reason behind it, a reason not to eliminate. You have to keep your airport open to and available to all air traffic.
And I'd be curious just to see the data on that about that we're so cheap to fly into, because like flying into Logan. Most expensive thing about flying into Logan is TSA. The actual landing fees and everything in Logan aren't bad. The fuel is very expensive, I'll give you that, but the landing fees themselves, they're not crazy. So I'm just saying, I'd be curious, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'd like to kind of understand that a little bit better, because. I mean, a lot of like places.
We're not out of whack either.
Right,
way.
I don't think we're super low,
Which
but
is why I think a 5%.
Yeah.
You know, is a number that if we were to agree, on this draft to change the ones that were going up from 3.5 to 5 for this year.
that's reasonable.
And have that, you know, and it's also, there's a public aspect of, you know, that the airport's making those increases, and I think that's more than that, even if it's what it really should be, I would like to see us work on that over a couple of years, personally.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I, now that I can remember, we are starting collective bargaining next week to kick off. We have not gone to that point yet, but that is in the works because the union agreement does expire. It's going to, so they need to keep in consideration the percentages of cost of living increases that will be voted upon and agreed upon. So, and like I said, this is my first time here at the airport. Traditionally, they've been between 4% and 5%. Am I correct to say that for both?
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
3 to 5, yeah. But the last 2 years, 48%.
I don't believe we're restricted to changing fees once a year, even though it's a painful process that we
Yeah,
probably
no.
don't want to do more
That's
often.
right.
So we could put a fee increase now, and if we came out of collective bargaining or there was some other event that significantly increased fees, we could raise fees 6 months from now or adjust them on less than an annual basis if necessary.
So some of it has to do with the leases and the timing of getting the leases out for, you know, April. You know, for those rates, it's gonna be whatever is in effect at that time. So I mean, that's part of why I think we have done it in the past. So I guess to move on through this, is there is there agreement that we should move for the items that are overall change, we would move from the 3.5 to the 5 or another number?
Agree with that.
Does that work? All right,
Yep.
so if you guys would do a revised.
Yes.
Document that adjusts those, understanding there may be some rounding and I believe, you know, that's not gonna be exact, you know, it might be 5.2 if one of them
Yeah.
get to a quarter
Mhm.
or something like that, but. You know, for everybody,
Do that, yeah.
right, what you think it should be close to that as an increase, that additional 1.5%. And then, okay, so let's keep going then through. Go ahead, Warren. So now that takes us through
Pretty much takes
on
us
to page,
about page 5 is what I'm looking at. The use service and administrative fees. So we did add a couple of additional fees in here for disabled aircraft assistance, support equipment, damage to airport property, and clean up of hazardous materials. Those are the things that I've seen other airports, when I've been that we had, and we just didn't have here, to recoup costs in the form of an event that would happen there. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to touch base just on the categories that they will change on the Mr. Levitt's suggestion? Should we? Yeah.
that's on page 5.
Oh, okay.
4. No, that's on page 4, right? Is that what you're saying? So
Yeah.
item 4
Oh,
for
yeah.
the FBO users.
Yes,
I
yes.
think we could review that.
Yes, I apologize. Yes, we did, with the ramp fees and the, landing fees, thank you. For the fixed base operator, FBO users, we did include a new line item for poundage for, aircraft weighing 15,001 pounds to 25,000 pounds. To be more streamlined with, other airports, have it, with their categories.
So we changed the 10,499 to 10,000.
Correct.
Again, more common. That falls a more common fee structure.
Also the waiver of, purchase of 10,000 gallons, we, specified that to be gas only, as there was some confusion, between that and the charge field. Yeah, please.
The fee waiver, is that only for, yeah, if those, we include in their, training? Like. I thought.
It does flight school operations.
Okay.
So that's it. It is great.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I missed that. I was looking for that earlier.
Yeah, flight school operations, so we've talked about that. So like that from Chatham.
Yeah,
The holidays for no longer an entity.
Oh, so maybe we could strike that, please, then. We want
the holidays for news is no more
to
close.
strike that.
Okay. Look at that. Sounds good. Moving on, I do believe, we needed to update, it's just the different hangars, 4 as non-immediate, hangars 2 and 3 as I think for this confusion as to which hangars those were, so we made the changes there. I've also addressed the use, service and administration, the addition of those new, costs. We also are changing the boarding ramp stair use fee from $25 up to $50 per turn. As well as the lav service is $100 per lav use. And then, of course, we included the mobile preheater at $100 max for each hour use. We also are suggesting an increase in the fingerprinting for security from $50 to $75 per individual. Same with photography and filming. We do get a lot of that at the airport, and we've never had a line item for that. So we have suggested $300 for the first hour, $200 for each additional hour above that. And then moving on with non-aeronautical fees, we kind of streamlined the other charges for the different taxi, library, charter, courtesy van, and made it a lot cleaner. We removed the library charter services from section C and basically put them in with F, as those more fall in line with the library. And so that was the big change we did for those two. And then I think that. No, we did the bus display case, that's correct. We had one entity who's sought interest in displaying within our buses. This business, and we included that for $600 per year. Other than photography as well. So yeah, I think that those are the changes that we had.
I had a question on item 6 for the use service and administrative fees. I'm on page 5 again at the bottom. And you added items A through D, but there's no costs. It's just that would be whatever your intent here would be, to be able to have it in here for cost recovery.
Correct.
And then simply refer to our rates and charges as the basis for that.
That would be correct. And for instance, like a disabled aircraft, if we had to have one of our staff go out there, have to recover such an aircraft.
Determine what it
It's
is.
time that we would, out of what his salary would have cost him to grab.
Does this need any further legal or is there any other supporting language? Yeah.
as a suggestion, we have it that rates and charges for all of our people. Like what we would charge, like if you need the front end loader to go out there to move a plane or whatever, do you have all that?
We've got a list of equipment and personnel, supervisors, laborers,
So you could
what they
figure-
would
you could-
charge.
And everybody would be the same, like you have that enough of a basis that if it happened to 2 people. 2 people get a bill for a similar situation, one isn't, 500 and one isn't 1,500.
Yeah, we've got a rate.
Okay, that's all I was
I
getting.
don't believe it was ever approved by the commission. It was more of an internal.
I think that's fine because you know what your costs are, but
Yeah, I was just gonna say to you, what you're asking though is if we made reference to that and whatever those rates are, then it makes it cleaner when you get challenged down the road.
right, there might need to be an asterisk, that's all I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Just when you have a rates and charges and it leaves something like that a little open, that was all I was trying to, that's what I was trying to get
Well,
at.
these are ad hoc expenses. This is not a rate sheet here.
Yeah, that's why it's a
Yeah.
little, it's just sort of
Yeah.
putting it somewhere that when you give them that bill, you
I
can
would think
say,
common sense would say that we're gonna charge this whether it's in the rates and charges or not. You know,
Yeah.
you pull the gear up and your props hit the runway and they
But-
drag the airplane up. You know, if I'm only owning the airplane, I would expect to be charged for somebody picking up
that's
the
a good
junk.
point.
Yeah, but
You
they-
can point to Article
You know,
6.
you say that, but you know, I had my pre fail.
Yeah.
And I ended up I wasn't on the runway, but they didn't charge me anything from helping.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I like that. You know, there's an aspect of
I
that,
mean, the guy
but
went
you
and-
never know when this turns into, you had to have guys on overtime for,
Right,
Yeah, you
I
know.
understand. Yeah.
Well, perhaps rather than trying to come up with every instance where we may have to dedicate people to a specific task, that you add something in there that says any other special service that requires airport personnel will be billed at their standard
Current
rate by
rates.
rate. You know, you've got a fee for photography, but if somebody's got to go out there and hold the lights, we should charge an hourly rate for our people and equipment.
yeah, something of that, you know, at manager's discretion. Tied to current rates.
Mhm.
We do have that on the special permit application, that additional charge of escorting or
If someone's
services.
seeking that, I mean, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, that's all I was.
I think one thing to add is. I think a lot of it is geared toward spill response. If an aircraft, if. You know, we've had aircraft on the ramp before where it's off the wings, now there's fuel coming out of the vents. Pilot may say, "I don't worry about that, happens." And now we're using a spill kit that's $1,500 to bring this all up, so.
Well, then your point is perhaps in addition to just the hourly personnel rates and cost of any materials.
That's exactly what's on that list.
Aircraft support.
Yeah. And or materials and supplies.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Want to do small comments?
Yeah, I've got a bunch. I'm sorry.
No,
I know everybody
no,
wants to go home for dinner. So just kind of going through this, and you guys have done this every year for a while, so I apologize. Where we're using the term signatory terminal user, is that basically only Cape Air?
Correct.
There's a definition somewhere for that.
Well, it says the definition is year round and a minimum of 2 days per week. Why is it 2? Seems to me if we're gonna have regular service here, it should be more than 2 days per week.
Well, I mean, it's a fair discussion, but would we, let's say you had an operator that wanted to, we're trying to encourage someone to come in to provide that year-round service. Would we be happy if a large carrier came in on Friday and Sundays? I think we would. Would you want to see them get that? You know, why would you want to make it more restrictive when you already don't have entrance to the market?
Yeah, if it's 10 people,
That's a good point.
then you would maybe make it more restrictive. but we don't.
Right.
So we're trying to.
That would be my thought on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good point. Your description here on this common use square footage, that you're basing it on the share of enplaned passengers in the past 3 years average. How do you handle new entrants if they haven't been here for 3 years and have an average?
I'd have to-
Which one is it? I'm sorry.
Common use space.
C and D are based upon 3 year. You know,
That's
your
in the
point about
tent,
we're
right?
encouraging
That's in the
new.
Common use space would, I think, would include just terminal, whole room, tent.
That's right, hold on.
And then it's a formula based on
Yeah,
employment. I don't know
employment.
how Noah would do those performance.
Yeah, I heard that those, I mean, that's fine, but luckily, since I work for the airport, all of the current commercial airlines, we have data for the last 3 years of average, but that's a good point. If a new one wanted to come in, then we're gonna have to put them in here, and they will have to pay some rent as well. Now, the other question is, do we actually have a spot for another airline to come in at this point as of right now? Because I don't think we do.
Well,
But I understand. that-
rather than not
Yeah, they're not.
working them in, maybe it's based upon available seats or some formula that allows you to drop in a new entrant?
Mm.
Because the new entrant shouldn't really get a free
It could
ride.
be on just on last year's employments as well.
Well, but again, new entrant had 0 last year.
Do we do it based on what we charge for entrance as it is? We charge a flat fee based on the entrance, correct? For all the airlines, is it an average of everything?
Specifically, we're talking about the common use rent. And
I'm just curious.
And the
how
under
you
the
figure
10.
that Based it on, so you would charge like so much per person?
well, the
I was wondering
15,
if you can charge them retroactively for the first, until you get the data that you need for them to go for. So whatever the average would be for like your other airlines. Does that make sense?
yeah. When we could change that, again, it's,
Until it's established, right?
Yeah.
To flip it.
I'm assuming the $15 per square foot was, came probably, from appraiser and, there's just formula and spreadsheet that I inherited from the previous airport manager, that we've been using to create the performance for the new airlines. And we could definitely think about, changing that. So what would your suggestion be?
A suggestion may be that a new entrant would pay a fee similar to another airline operating with a similar capacity
Okay,
at the manager's discretion.
so just like a language, we can just have a sentence for that, but if the new airline comes on board.
If somebody else is gonna run 1 flight a day, look at what somebody else with 1 flight a day. the
Based
same
on your
number of available
schedules.
Seats, so it's someplace to start.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
And this would be both for signatory and non-signatory, correct?
Well, any place you've got a formula based upon the 3-year preceding average and you want to lift that up above 0. Yeah.
okay, we could do that.
On my next question, on 2H on your RON fees, you've got 2 tables for common joint use and preferential use. What's in each bucket of common joint versus preferential? I'm on page 3 here. Actually, it's on page 2 as well. You've got 2 columns.
Oh, yeah, Crystal? Please. Common joint and preferential use, that's the spots for the airplanes.
So the way that we have it set up is preferential use would be, so last year United's on 1, that's their preferential spot. If they were overnight in that spot, I'm not taking anybody else's spot, I'm not taking up the common use spot or the overflow. So that, I think that rate is lower
Yeah.
compared to what if we have a plane that's stuck on our overflow gate. Where we would want to have it open for delays or something like that instead of something like that.
And how many common use spots we have?
1.
There's only one.
Well, 2, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Two.
2. I keep forgetting about the
Yeah.
So we need to define that. Like like underneath those columns in some manner, like anybody looking at our rates and charges
So
should understand.
the preferential use is really assigned.
Or be eliminated if that's where the discussion is going to.
I mean, the fact that most people at this table don't know what the 2 of them are.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it's good though, preference is assigned,
Assigned spot.
Yeah.
assigned spots and.
so that might be a
otherwise
better,
you're not-
better verbiage,
Mhm.
would be
Assigned
assigned
date,
gate
yeah.
versus common gate. I just think that even assigned, I would understand better than preferential. And again, that gets you to the worry of the FAA, who's preferred.
I was thinking that these words may have been from, say,
Definitely,
FAA,
yeah.
but we can look in.
Okay, yeah, I don't have a
That's fine.
problem like with
Right.
it. I just think it's a fair point that I didn't understand it either. And if someone's trying to, look at this,
Sure.
Or you can put a definition.
Mhm.
yeah, or you could have below
Just
it
Yeah.
that says, you have a small sentence that explains it either way. You might add the word gate, you know, or, and I know you're trying to
Spot, we
fit a
call them
lot in
spot.
this formatting, you know, there's abbreviations that are needed, but, okay, Mike?
The LEO services, it says that it's based upon the preceding April to October. Do you just bill that once a year at the end of the season, or is that paid monthly? I'm trying
It's-
to understand what the April to October means.
We, so we look at the employments for the previous season and we create the new leases with the commercial airlines. We include that, Leo charge and we bill them once annually.
So they're not actually paid on employments. You're taking last year's number.
We take the last year's number and we calculate how much extra we had to pay for Leo services, than our usual budgeted amount. And that difference we split, between based on the employments, we calculate a percentage and then we allocate that to the different airlines. So it will be, based on their employments. If Delta had, let's say, 37,000, they will pay that rate, multiplied by $37,000, and that will be their annual rate.
So I'm going to come back to my question now expanded. One, a new entrant had 0 last year.
Right.
So you'd be charging them 0. And if JetBlue decides to increase their service by 50%,
Then
and
the
you're
full-
charging them based upon what they used last year, doesn't really seem to be appropriate for the services that we're actually going to have to provide this year.
I totally understand, but that's how it was, always been set up, and then we have to change the whole way how we charge them right now, because we cannot predict how many employments they're gonna have in the next year. And we usually send those new leases in April for this upcoming season.
Well, perhaps rather than tying it to employments, you tie it to available seats. You know how many seats they're going to have, and come up with some formula that allows you to actually look at the services that they're going to be using this year versus coming up with a number based upon what they did last year. And the way flight schedules change from year to year, I don't think that's really
I'm not sure that we know their full flight schedule, in March and February and March when we develop the leases. And then, I don't know enough how other airports are doing it. I don't know if that's something standard that how other airports are charging for their use services. I'm not sure.
Well, aren't you charging them each month for the number of employments for some other fee?
We do not charge them directly. PFCs we just literally receive a check, for every quarter from each airline. They have internal system. There is a big company. It's called Clearinghouse. Almost every airline uses them, and we just literally receive, a check every quarter, based on their employments, with a report with the numbers.
But that will give you a number as to how many employments there were.
Right, but then that again means that I need to charge them later, not at the time of signing the lease, and I don't know if that will be an issue for the commercial airlines, and that will be a question now.
You have to bill them after,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's a cost recovery, you know, versus you at the time of the lease. The only one I see is, I see your point that, you know, what if there's a big change? Yeah.
So I don't know how this charge was developed,
So-
from, how do we get charged?
There from the police
for the
department.
police department,
so
we
the
get,
three of
weekly invoices. Yeah,
John?
oh, from the police department, we get weekly invoices, they have their certain rate,
So is that number can change? What was supposed to be?
their rate could change if, select board or whatever police decides and
I
they
mean,
change.
essentially, you know how many hours are gonna be there, and you know what the fixed cost is.
Approximately,
Approximately.
that changes every year. For example, we spent $10,000 this year less for Leos than last year, and all it depends from the schedule of the planes as well. And how late they go, how early they start in the season, and how late they go, because we need to cover that period. For example, JetBlue started earlier last year than this calendar year. Couple airlines finished earlier this calendar year than last year. So this number can change too. This year, for example, was lower, what we actually paid for Leos, and that's why the rate, the employments didn't go down. They are about the same as what we had last year, but we just
But they
spent
got
less
done
on Leos.
less time. The people came and went less. time.
Yes.
So that's why.
Yeah, and so that's why the rate is changing from 41 cents to 34 cents.
How about, based upon the airlines, whether it's prior use or forecast use unavailable seat miles, they pay one fee with their lease in February, and then at the end of the season, there's a true-up based upon their actual plane passengers, which you would get off of the PFC invoices. And aren't the airlines paying for other services after the fact?
They pay for landing and ramping for landing and ramp fees a month later. So if they finished in October, they will have an invoice in November. But other than that, no, they wouldn't. They pay off for the fuel and they're done for the season. My only concern will be, and again, I'm not legal and I don't know how other airports are doing, but this is already incorporated in the current leases, and this is work between Anderson and Kruger and our office manager and the airline. So I just don't know if there's going to be any sort of pushback if we change that now, and if this can be incorporated in the lease.
Well, if it's gonna be a new lease next year, I'm sure it could be changed. Perhaps,
It's extension,
There is with renewal options, yeah.
but so did they just do it with the extension? Because it was for 3 years with extension.
Correct.
Yeah.
We started it last year.
So this new one will be an option to extend for them. So it can really change the original lease.
okay, one other suggestion
Yeah.
before we spend all night on this. Perhaps as opposed to charging based upon employed passengers.
Mhm.
We just charge for each departure and we tie it to the same way we're counting landing fees and ramp usage. And you assume, 80% of the available seats, or whatever number you want to come up with, it sort of gets you to the same number. And it makes the counting of it much easier, and two, you're billing them for that landing and ramp fee anyways.
When you say departure, you mean for this upcoming season? Or, because
Yeah.
that's the thing, we don't know their schedule in February or March.
No, but you're going to know how many landing fees you're charging JetBlue for. Correct? Which happens after
You mean
after the
in
last.
November, you mean like,
Well, I assume at the end of July, you charge them for all of the July landings.
So I think the problem is, which I understand where you're confused, is that she doesn't know how much to charge.
It's a less than perfect system.
I understand what you're saying, but she doesn't know what that fee should be, so she can't put it in here to say it's gonna be X number of dollars per landing.
And we're
Right.
getting,
And that's what-
we're recovering the cost. I think your point is making sure that it's fair to the users, but if it's pretty close and the biggest problem would be a new entrant that gets a year sort of free, if you would, right? But we also, we don't really have who breaking down the door here, and I think that if maybe you have another suggestion, then that is going to work and work with them, maybe we come up with that. But I mean, it's been set, and all we're really doing is kind of moving things around, the chairs around a little bit. But we're still getting the same money in, right?
to Mr. Gasparo's point, we are recovering the cost from the fees. For example, now in April, we're gonna be recovering the cost from the year before that, the calendar year. So we're just recovering cost here. So if there was a new company that entered, I wouldn't use them in the calculation. We're still gonna recover that cost. I just wouldn't charge them that year. I'll be charging them the following year, because when I will be actually recovering the cost from 2026, if that makes sense.
Yes, except if an airline doesn't come back.
Well, if they don't come
Not gonna
back,
Cover what they had
It's
last
the
year.
opposite of the other side, and I would
Yeah.
just say that my recollection on this was that first off, we had to increase the Leo agreement so that we had the coverage. That was also a big part of this. And there was one school of thought that you don't even have this charge because it's simply part of the service that you provide to the airport, and it's covered under the other charges that they pay. So at least so do we really want to change it and have it be subject to additional review and discussion when it's something that we've been getting from the operators?
Okay, one last suggestion, then we can move on because I do have a few other points here. Perhaps, as Billy's pointed out, we're doing contract extensions. As we start to do new contracts, perhaps we think about moving to a different metric for calculating it that would be more closely tied to their actual operations rather than looking backwards. And then over time, there'll be a period in between where there'll be some people on each.
Right, if you think we can come on, if you have a suggestion, I think, and you can work that out for what that might be, I think we'd be open to it, but I mean, it's up to everybody, not just me, but I just feel like, the other side of that is we're getting the fee for that service, and that is really, I think, and if we go and revise it, and we're going down in this one, so it's probably not something that's gonna get in a public hearing and more concerned if we start to change the metric. Does the whole thing come up and someone says you should just be, what are you talking about? You're charging us extra for that. You're also charging us, you're running an airport and you're charging landing fees and you're charging terminal fees and you're charging, wouldn't that be possibly be part of that? I don't know. I think it's a case.
I can tell you at other regional
Yeah.
airports, Hanscom, White Plains, Teterboro, each aircraft is charged a security fee in addition to their landing fee. And what they call a security fee is essentially.
It's the same
an
thing,
LEO
okay,
fee.
so.
And it's tied, it isn't tied to the number of seats on the airplane, it's tied to each airplane.
So that would be our other metric. Instead of in plane passengers, it's simply operations.
Right, which is what I was suggesting before, because we're already counting the number of landings and the number of times they hit the ramp.
But the problem there is when you collect the fee, you gotta bill them after. And maybe that, if you do it that way. We're gonna get paid, but then. And if you don't, you're not gonna get a lease the following year, right? That's your, if you were to do it on operations.
We're already sending them an invoice already that says landing fees, ramp fees, and it's adding one.
So I'm saying security, you'd be adding security fee per operation.
On the monthly activity report, that's the
Yeah.
document they send, and I build them based on that. So that's your suggestion. And then we have to determine what that fee might be, and again, I don't think at this point, the whole lease, the original lease has to be and that's, again, it doesn't include FBO. All of this is just for the commercial airlines.
So your point before about maybe we think about a way to do it and.
Yeah.
And come back,
Okay.
I'll draft something there. Just one minor cleanup here, number 2, we'd say a non-signatory terminal user is somebody who's less than year round. As we said before, it's also somebody, I guess, that's less than twice a week. So somebody year round once a week would not be a signatory. So I think you just need a little cleanup language here. You've got a section on FBO scheduled service. Do I assume that's Tradewinds, Slate, JSX?
That's correct. Yeah, the Part 380 charters. Initially, it was actually that verbiage was in the fixed base operator FBO users, and we realized that's we needed to move it to schedule because those are scheduled charters. Yeah.
And like for Tradewinds, how do you separate their 135 flights from their scheduled flights?
Do they, I think that they let us know that. am I
I'm
correct?
sorry, I was on the previous one, just making a note.
Oh.
What was the question?
Tradewinds operates both a scheduled service and then an on-demand 135. So how do you give a way of differentiating those flights?
They also submit the monthly activity report, and I build them landing and ramp fees based on that.
Okay. And you indicate that these fees are for passenger capacity of 9 or less. What are you doing with the Part 380s? And how are you charging those fees to them? And I guess the second part of it is, with the 12.5 security program going into effect, how are you planning to handle, for instance, Slate and JSX, who's going to fall into that category and require security?
Correct, and that was a question that I had brought up is do we include security with, do we recoup those costs for security? And I think Rob was our security coordinator, said it's cleaner, just not have to recoup those costs, but the security fee on that end of the house. But I mean, it's a question that I had brought up.
Well, they're screening themselves, correct?
Yeah, but I mean, wouldn't Leo need to address an issue if something were to go over there, if something were to be found,
If they got called, but they're not, I don't believe the 12.5 program requires a on-site Leo.
Right, it's a true there. That's right.
Yeah,
In which case you could, if it was some big incident, you have it under that other catch-all.
we could just transfer them the cost if something like that would have happened and charge them the rate, whatever the police is charging us for those hours.
But your your language here says that Section 3, the scheduled service, is aircraft with capacity of 9 or fewer seats, which doesn't include the 380s, which are Slate and JSX. I don't know if we have anybody else coming on.
I may have grabbed the wrong one because on this one, I show that we put in the Part 380 charters required advanced coordination.
Yeah, we
did. That's in our
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we did put the 380 into this section as well.
Well,
Yeah,
it says it requires coordination, but it doesn't say if they're paying different fees.
It's just more of a language thing. We just need to update with that one then. Because they should be paying those fees because that's what they fall into.
yeah.
So it just, must be a language thing. We'll update the language on that then.
Okay. Okay. Another minor thing on Part 4A, the landing fees. You're under 6,000, went from $7 to $8. And then on the over 6,000 pounds, you raised the fee. You kept that same 42 base rate, which if you do the math before, that probably, I think it was probably 7 times 6 is 42, and now if you're 8 times 6, that should probably be 48.
Let's see. Yeah, okay, got it. You're right. Yeah. Right, for both, too, as well. For the
And 387
Got it.
and 1.5% more.
Yes, the tree.
Yeah, you got it. Got it.
Yes, yeah, all of it, we're gonna redo it with the 5. Yeah,
Actually,
Yeah.
48. Yeah.
yes.
Good catch.
That's, yeah.
Okay, I'm probably gonna get less popular as the night goes on. Section 5, tie downs. I guess the one thing that jumps out at me is a grass tie down costs $9.80. And it comes with a parking pass. And if one wants to just buy a parking pass, it's $1,500. So it's cheaper to buy a tie down and get yourself a parking pass. There just seems to be a disconnect there that we're throwing in something that we price elsewhere for $1,500 and get the tie down with it. I don't know what the philosophy is on that pricing.
I would say that it's because you can't get a tie down without an airplane starters. You can't just go rent a tie down, get a car parking spot. And
Right.
Get in a parking spot, not where everybody else is parking $1,500. You're parking in a secure area that's inside the gate over there by the, I think that's the fundamental difference. You get a tie down for an airplane, you have to be a pilot. Put it in.
I get that. We're not gonna, where we have a waiting list for tie downs, I don't think we're gonna give away tie downs. It just seems that the value of a tie down seems to be rather low if it's coming with a parking pass. That elsewhere we charge money for. So that we charge more for the parking pass than the tie down with the parking pass. Is that that seem odd to anybody else? I know a lot of
Yeah.
these things it's always been done this way, but I'm just trying to understand why the pricing
may.
model is that way.
If I may, real quick. I reached out to Hyannis Vineyard, Plymouth, Robinstown, Marshfield, Hanscom, Republic, which I think is Long Island, Bar Harbor. There's not a whole lot of grass tie downs out there. But the one I did find was, Provincetown, they were $800, we're $980. Even all the other airports with the reserved annual asphalt tie down, which we're pretty right in line with, everybody except for the Vineyard comes with free parking. And I think I think it's also good to say that we have a lot of year-round pilots now, local pilots, and it promotes aviation in that sense. I think that's a good kind of leeway that we can give.
That's generally a policy too. Give the small guy a break. Okay, yeah.
Just for discussion purposes, the other alternative would be a tie down. And then if you wanted the parking, it would be an add-on to the tie down, but the cost would only be the delta to what the annual parking in the lot would be. So I'm not saying it's, I'm just saying for a discussion, if we're gonna think about that, right? What if you were to say, let's just say for round numbers, the grass is we set it to $1,000. It doesn't come with a parking spot, and if you wanted it with a parking spot, you'd pay 500 more. And then that would be the same as getting just the parking spot in the parking lot.
Is this parking in the corral?
Yeah, the corral, or are we just, again, I just think it's
I think you're just gonna charge $1,500 for tie down then, because
everyone's gonna want the.
how are you gonna get to your plane?
Yeah.
How are you gonna get to your plane? So
Yeah.
you're gonna come in through
No,
the
no, we
gate,
don't wanna
put your
be
stuff in the
yeah,
plane.
yeah, well,
Back out the gate so
yeah.
you don't park in the
No,
corral.
no. Yeah, I'm with you on it. I'm just throwing out for a discussion, but that's,
I agree with that. It's generally aviation. A lot of these guys are the nuts and bolts in Nantucket.
yeah.
They don't have a lot of money. And that may sound odd if they're flying an airplane, but they don't. A lot of
No,
these
no,
guys
I understand.
regular
I'm all for
people, and they're
GA. I'm not trying
fly.
to, I just think I think it's worth mentioning that it's 15, that's a fair point, but I think that your point of that it just doesn't work otherwise, like, so what I just brought up for discussion, you just said, well, sure, that's great if you're a math guy, but if you really look at how something's gonna work,
Yeah.
then it doesn't work, and that's what we're all here for.
Yeah,
It's-
I'm sorry.
No, I think that's
No, you're right.
that you're right. I think you're right. I do. I think that's the good discussion that happens on these, so that why you can't just look at just the book.
Yeah.
That you have to say, well, how do you then go and do that, right? And then de facto, you would be then, which I don't, I wouldn't want to see that would be a $520 increase to somebody, year over year, which so we're basically, now, is there reason or the basis for those two increases, right? So one's increasing by 60 and one's increasing by 30. Is it sort of just
I believe it was the 3.5%,
It's the
so it
CPI.
jumped to 5.
Is the
so we
CPI.
would apply the 5 to
I
that,
think so.
Yes,
which that seems, if everybody else is paying that, so I should be able to do that, but so in which case, say, like 1630 times 1.05, we go to 1711. But then that's for the ramp, right?
Yeah.
So it's like everyone else is getting it's a 5% across the board. Was that seemed like it makes, like, that's fair? That's a good question.
What do you think, Phil?
I think 5%, and you're saying these other places, the comps that you've come up with,
Most everybody that I talked to, was free parking except for the vineyard. They did.
So that's fine. I think I mean, at least I'm not pushing them. I think the part for the side, but in general for, what do they charge?
Oh, for the, asphalt?
Yeah,
The asphalt tie downs that I found were, one was 600, one was, 1,000, 1,100, 1,000, 1,400. Republic was 54. That seems.
so it's Nantucket.
Bar Harbor
we're-
is 1,200.
I think if we're going 5% across the board, it's hard not to do 5% for that.
I'm saying fit to the standard that we are.
Yeah. Instead of three,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
were already going 3.5, but instead of 1690, it's 17,
No,
whatever,
yeah.
1710, or whatever, right?
I think it's better than,
Messing with the parking.
Correct.
Yeah, I think I think that would be, I brought this up a bunch of years ago, too, if you're just looking at it. Then how do you get that spot, but then you take the other piece, so we don't need to beat it to death, but
And just back up a second, right? So a lot of the parking tickets are people that are using the cars for to earn a living. And then coming back and forth to the airport, a lot of them, right? These are guys, this is a recreational thing, by and large. Like that's going on, isn't it?
yeah,
So that's a fundamental difference.
sure, so we want the airport for,
Right.
right?
So just like,
It's like the other discounts that you can get. Yeah, that's fair, right? So
I have no problem with that. I mean, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
bring it up that it's there. But then the next part of it is, it looks like if you've got a tie down, in addition to your free parking, you also get free GPU and free preheat fee. And that part of it, where we were talking before about waive hourly rates for our people, if somebody needs a preheat or a GPU, it requires staff to bring the equipment over there and bring it back. I'm all for supporting small GA.
How much, how much is that gonna happen? I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was
Something
gonna
with the
wonder.
recip,
we don't want
Yeah,
to.
you're not preheating, get rid of the GPU. I mean, that's for a big airport.
that would be more like, my experience is the only time that I can ever remember actually having to ask these guys to come to jumpers because somebody had it bad.
I think that's what it was based on.
Yeah, so it's really not
it's a dead battery.
commercial.
We're not gonna charge them the
no,
$50 to go over there and for 5 minutes and.
no, we want to be
Yeah, it's like, I've never seen anybody preheat over there ever.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've only ever seen the GPU once.
We may have towed some airplanes into a heated hangar, for a couple of
Let
hours.
it warm, let the engine warm up.
Or just melt some ice or
Yeah, there
whatever.
was like, so.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was based on.
Okay. Okay, next third rail I'll come and touch. My understanding is that, we indicate on here that we're not charging landing and ramp fees to tie downs. But I understand we're also not charging them to hangared aircraft. And nowhere in our fee schedule does it say that the fees are waived for hangared aircraft. So somebody apparently made a decision not to charge them.
So my understanding was that because it's home based there. We're all based there, that's why we don't do that.
Yeah.
That's
Might
pretty
be a
standard
language.
everywhere. in the
Yeah.
country.
Absolutely.
Okay, but
So should we have,
You don't need to say that, I don't
Yeah.
disagree with you, but I'm just saying that's kind of the general rule. That's your home base, you don't pay to land.
That would be shocking.
So should we have,
What?
so it's understood that it's practice, but again, as we're trying to make sure that we have a complete document.
It should say,
If home base, there's no land.
And what definition of home principal garages listing for your
well,
aircraft or how do you?
when you submit your insurance certificate,
Yeah,
it says it on the insurance certificate, it says it right there. So it's easy for the FBO to understand, but, when I
Yeah.
get my insurance certificate.
where would we, let's see, tie down, we have other fees written down. Would we have an item D? Under this, that clarify, or would it just go under where it says T hangers and keep it in B? And have the same, sort of language that you have under tie down? That, home-based aircraft are not assessed. Landing and ramp fees for their non-commercial operating.
That's the best.
Makes sense?
Do we want to limit it to aircraft under 10,000 pounds? Do we?
I don't think that, I mean, if it's a home base, it's
home
home base,
Well, it's home-based, non-commercial, right?
right, not commercial.
Okay. Um,
There are a couple guys, there is, you know.
That way, when
we
I
have a-
get
we
my
have a tentative
DC
figure.
three, you know, just to fly around.
Yeah.
This.
I only have two more items at the best. This one. I'm not clear reading this, and Maria probably knows. The freight carriers, for instance, UPS and FedEx, where are they paying ramp fees, or are they? Is there somewhere in the schedule?
So they're paying landing fees based again on the monthly activity report that they send me. And based on all inbound gross weight, they pay 7 cents per pound. And this is all in those monthly activity reports they send me and I bill them.
But do they pay a ramp fee as well?
So they pay like an annual
What were we talking about? Sorry.
mountain air,
I believe that's in their lease agreement. That's identified their park position, and
Yeah.
I think it's an add-on.
yeah, it's an annual fee and it's for their parking spot. So they do not pay like overnight ramp fees or anything like that, no. And that will be Cape Air for USPS, Mountaineer Cargo and Ameriflight.
Okay, my last one. I think conceptually, we want people that use the airport to pay for wear and tear in the airport every time you land an airplane or taxi on the ramps. The most frequent aircraft that use our airport are a couple of 208s that are used to ferry employees over for a local retailer. I don't believe they're paying any landing or ramp fees, and I know they don't buy any fuel from us.
Who are we
Are
talking
they?
about? Are we home?
Yeah.
They are paying landing fees.
They are paying. landing fees.
Yes,
Okay.
again, they submit monthly activity report.
Right.
Their pilot does, and they pay landing fees and they're paying for their parking spot. It's part of their, actually, they have a hangar, they have a land lease.
They're not landlines, they
Yeah,
are on your side.
yeah.
Okay, great. I take that back. I didn't see it in the numbers and, wow.
Yeah, but they do, yeah, they don't,
And does that mean that everybody else that has their own hangar, not the common hangars, is also paying landing fees, or are they considered to be home-based aircraft and don't pay them?
As of right now, two hangars, common hangars would be considered home base and don't pay landing or rents.
And they're all non-commercial.
Okay. And there were other hangars there that have aircraft, and right? Yeah, the lease we just looked at for Hagedorn.
like Hagedorn.
Durham.
Did they pay landing and rent fees?
No,
No,
we're not. That's a
So this
private
new
hangar.
distinction would be whether he calls Nantucket home or a different aircraft, right? So if we were to make that change under the rates and charges, if I'm understanding this, and he wants to say Nantucket's my home airport, I'm home based here, then he wouldn't get charged. But if he actually home bases somewhere else, then he would. Is
Except
that?
if he's really hangar, I mean,
I know, it still seems a little
home facing.
rough.
Well, he owns a hangar, if that's what we're talking about. I don't know how you would
Trying to
track that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make it difficult, I'm trying to have.
I don't know how you would-
So that it's clear. Before we have a public hearing, that somebody gets too upset that is something we're not gonna do, so we should try to decide. are, the point is essentially all tenants are not paying landing fees. That's sort of the way that the rates are structured, and that's the way it's.
And it's that have an active lease agreement where it's.
And that's
I know.
typical with most other airports.
I can't speak to the,
Yeah, I mean,
I would think if they're paying for this,
for the
tenants,
lease.
all this stuff, why, I don't.
I think,
we should be making
Mike's
every time
point
they-
in trying to just for the other side
As
of
a
it,
non-commercial. by the way.
right, a non-commercial is that, well, one person comes, uses the heck out of their plane, right, wear and tear, like they're coming and going every day, and then this other person uses it 4 times a year. Is that the same? But I think you start to get to a point of you gotta track all of this and.
We're gonna wear out the staff, though, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
They need a raise.
I kind of think the way it actually currently is now is a good policy to have, and we should stay with it, and that. If they are paying a lease, they're in a hangar, non-commercial, they don't pay.
It's
The way it is now,
non-commercial.
Non-commercial,
That means a
and
lot.
then when Marine Home Center is
Commercial.
essentially, they're paying the fees.
Except-
That's the way.
Except I assume Marine operates Part 91. And they have a hangar and they could consider themselves home based, even though they don't spend the night here. So Maria just said they're paying landing fees. Under the change we just suggested, they would now be exempt from landing fees. And
No, we consider them a commercial operation.
what, how do you define commercial? Does it mean
That's
that
the.
when, if you're operating Part 91, are you commercial or not? Most corporate jets are operating 91. It could be owned by a company, but if it's privately owned and operated, it's a 91 flight.
I don't know, we need to narrow that down. We've already got an agreement for, Marine Home Center, most people. They're happy with that agreement. I don't think we need to philosophically.
So then maybe we don't
Slice and dice
add the
that.
language about the home base, I guess would be the question. Is that make things
Yeah.
more difficult by
Yeah.
adding that?
Yeah, let's just leave it the way it is. The guy that's got a hangar here, he's a private operator, he's not taking.
And it just went up 5%.
Yeah.
Right, so there's still an increase that's
That's right.
happening.
Well, I think an easier change may be where we have a fee schedule that talks about tie downs and common use hangars. Rather than just talk about these fees are included for the tie downs, we include the hangars listed here. Which don't cover these other larger hangars. That are currently paying fees.
You lost me on that one.
As opposed, the fees that are described here under
On
section
page
5,
section 5, yeah.
right? Where section A is tie down fees, and then we add the paragraph that they're exempt from
Yeah,
a variety of fees, and then we have section B on rentals for the hangar, the common use hangars and the T hangars. Why don't we just include that same paragraph that did not assess the parking and landing and ramp fees? And that way, the exemption is just gonna cover these hangars, not every hangar on the airport.
because then you might inadvertently capture the folks that you were just worried about.
They're not in these hangars, I don't believe.
They're not, no, Marine, Preston,
No, they're in.
So your point is,
hangar
okay,
7, I think.
they're not in 2, 3, or 4, neither
There might be
Mountaineer.
one other factor that we're missing here
Yeah.
is Madison audits them on a monthly basis. So back when this is 2000 and when did you look all that up, Elizabeth? 2015, when the commission adopted the landing fee incentive program where it was Cape Air, Marine Home Center, shuttle, all, if you wanted to agree to this, you would get audited and then you would get 85%, 85%?
85. Compliance.
Like a discount on your landing fees if you were following the flight corridors. for the voluntary flight.
That's what.
So they,
Noise
I
abatement.
think, signed up for that at the time, so. I don't know how that falls in play with your comment on part 90.
Yeah, I think that's why we would want to keep it the way it is. To try to promote the compliance with those routes.
Right,
But your point, I think, is to just move the paragraph.
Copy paste it and put it under,
Just
Change
cut
the
that
rental.
paragraph from under A, under tie downs, and put it under,
B.
would it actually go? Yeah, under B, and so you would want this to apply to hangars,
which is our common hangers, our
True.
box hangers.
T hangars and hangars
Correct.
2, 3, and 4. Right, does that make sense? And then it's clear. Hopefully.
I mean, I think that's our intent, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's the point, is that, you know, what we're trying to. I would say perfect, but improve, the document, so that anybody reading this should understand. And things are clear, so that, I think that makes sense. And that doesn't actually change anything.
And you went, you mentioned earlier, I just wanted to back up a second, the tie down, you got the 20 increase 5 to 5%.
Yeah,
Is that like a, annual contract?
It is annual lease.
It's just like the T hand then.
Yeah.
Here, so that, you're gonna change the way we.
And again,
across the board then.
yeah, and they get effective date is always April 1st.
Yeah.
If I may, so one of the questions I had with, offering incentives based off compliance to union noise abatement is, basically a lot of times I see that for some RKs, it's really, a relatively smaller proportion of them are getting, are in general for VFR flight quotas anyways. And so the question is, just so I'm clear about it, does the entire airline, say if it was KPF, get the incentives that we're building, or is it only the proportion that has one VFR?
I think it was their all in operations for that month.
But you're only auditing 20% of it, correct?
Yeah, so
And hopefully this new
about-
software. is
Right.
gonna
Yeah,
Fix
roughly,
that geofencing.
yes, and roughly about roughly only about 20% of our flights for Cape Air, say, or for GA are VFR flights, so that's about.
All right, Mike, did you have any more on that?
No, I'm done. And
Okay.
give me some time, I could probably come up with something.
So with that, we'll make these revisions, and if you could circulate that to the commission. Once it's available, if anybody has any further comments. Send them back in, Mr. Smith, please, and then we will have them, for a publication for the public hearing. We're gonna go through our usual, we're gonna advertise the public hearing. So that anyone who's watching knows that we're set for this public hearing on January 13th. To discuss rates and charges as we just discussed, but we're open to, any inputs that the public may have or then for the future. Regarding those changes. So with that, let's move on to the report, finance statistics.
Physics, you got it. I was gonna ask. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just real quick for the AIDF rates. Actually, this isn't under the AID now that I'm thinking about it, but we'll talk about it. Just the concrete hard stands for gates 1 and 2 to Alpha. The IFE was completed, and of course, the task order was approved earlier this evening, as we move forward there. The second ground GPU is scheduled to be built on the 9th of January and then shortly delivered thereafter. So we should have it by the end of January. For the high mast lights, there's a virtual demo of the lighting control system scheduled for Friday. To ask more technical questions regarding the control system. This is a long lead item, so we're trying to get on it now. Yeah, moving forward with that, the high mast lights there. And then the airport is working on the IFE with an estimated scope and task order scheduled to be presented for the commuter apron resurfacing project. We are meeting we're going to be able to present that TO and scope at next upcoming in January. All right, for non-AIP, sound barrier, Premier Fence has finally provided their preliminary scheduling for the project. January 5th, it will be mobilization and stockpiling. January 12th through March 6th is the installation of the drilled shafts. March 7th through April 24th will be the installation of the superstructure. And then, of course, April 24th is the anticipated substantial completion. There's a pre-conference being set up. Looks like at this rate, probably by next week, to talk more on that schedule with FJ and with Premier Fence. No TAAs. And then one thing to know regarding finance, there was a question in, I think, the last meeting regarding the environmental and dormitory line items. And a proposal to move those amounts to the contingency line. I don't believe that that should happen just due to municipal county in Massachusetts is just built on transparency, predictability, and statutory budget controls. And large contingencies show uncertainty, and the municipal finance is built on those proper appropriations. So I suggest that we keep those as they are, as Ms. Bashiba had outlined in our last meeting.
And if I may just add that, based on my experience, being on the other side with the finance department, being on every meeting for a couple of years with the finance committee, they do like to see specific purpose for when we budget money. They don't like to see big amounts of money in the contingency line item. The other two enterprises that they have that line item, they don't have such a large amount because once we make those changes and we move those money suggested out of the environmental and dorm budget line items, the contingency budget line item will be $350,000, which is significant. And we have annual meeting with finance committee when Lauren will be presenting our budget. It's usually always the last Saturday in January, and they do all town departments and enterprises. And I can see that the finance committee members might have some questions about that. And again, in my experience, they prefer to see specific purpose when we budget funds rather than just putting them in a different budget line item, even though we haven't spent the money the year before that. I feel like they'll be more in favor of approving our budget that way. I don't want to get to a point when they might question our contingency line item and maybe have to decrease our budget after resolving from that meeting in general. So that's why we wanted to suggest that we keep the budget as it is, and next year we can do a bigger cleanup and of those two line items after we have a little bit more data from this fiscal year.
I think doing that, we're not being honest with FinCom. We know we're not going to spend the environmental money or the dorm money. And we're saying that we're just leaving it there because we don't want the contingency number to be too high. But the reality is we need a large contingency number. We don't know what's going to break. We don't know what else is going to happen during the year. And I think we should be telling FinCom we're running a large enterprise with a lot of moving parts and things are going to break and we don't know what they are just now, but we're going to need funds for it, number one. And number two, I can't imagine why you would want to cut our budget. We're not taking any money from the town. We're completely self-sufficient. We make lots of money here at the airport, and you need to trust us to be able to spend it appropriately. And that's for real. Making the case that you want to leave it there because you think that they want to see a line item and they don't want anything too high for contingency. I think you should build your case on why we need a large contingency line item. And I would argue that perhaps it should be even larger. Look at what happened when you had the fuel farm repair last year. That was something that couldn't have been budgeted in advance. It broke, it needed to be fixed. And I can tell you something else is going to break this year that we don't know what it is. And you're going to be scrambling to move things between line items. And you're going to explain to us that the municipal finance rules allow you to move things between line items when you need to. So rather than stashing a little bit here and a little bit there, so you know where it is and you can move it later, why don't you just put it all in contingency now and be honest about what we're doing?
And the other thing I want to mention, we are allowed to move budget between line items, but even when we have large expenses like that, I don't like to do that, because when we budget for next year, I see the obvious reason why we spend so much money, and I can touch base on that and let you know why something happened, and that's why we are on the red in that particular one budget line item, but we had enough from the rest of the budget line items, so we were able to cover that. But this is just my opinion. We discussed it internally. At the end of the day, it's the airport commission's decision. So,
But I don't think when you need money to fix what breaks, you're gonna take a little money from here and a little money from here and a
No,
little
we
money from
wouldn't.
there to do it. If it all starts on contingency and you move it, and then at the end of the year, you're trying to explain what you did, it becomes very simple. You just explain what came out of the contingency budget and why.
in my, I don't, I totally understand your point. This has been my experience the last working for the town for 5 years. I might be wrong. They might not but I have a feeling they'll question that contingency number. And I know the chair had opinion about that as well. And I would definitely invite you to come to that budget meeting in January, and see what I'm talking about. But again, if it's the commission's decision, if you don't want to move it, and we leave it in contingency, that's fine. And we're gonna touch base on the meeting. Why we did it that way.
So, I mean, my point on it was, it's a fine line between contingency and being viewed as a slush fund. You know, and that's where we have to be careful with the finance committee, right? And I think you made very good points that it's responsible budgeting to say that you have a rainy day fund for the expected unexpected. You know, the other side of the coin is that perhaps that we end up spending some of that money on environmental or the dorm project. And you don't have to move it, or perhaps it ends up going to retained earnings. And if something comes up, then there is that ability to move it. I think they're both good points. Personally, I have to also give deference to the staff that are, trying to handle and manage this. So that's sort of where one of the things that, I mean, I don't know that there's a right or a wrong to this. I just think that, I've also sat through a lot of finance committee and, Capcom meetings, and, there is a fair bit of, extra review of the airport, and as you say, well, the airport's got money making it, well, then, the side is maybe you shouldn't spend as much, sort of a thing, maybe you don't need to increase these fees. So ultimately it's for everybody to decide, and that was so I felt that we should have a discussion here, because the commission had made a motion. Right now, as it stands, it stays in the contingency, because that's what the commission voted at the last time for the budget. So if nothing changes tonight, then that's how it will stay. The alternative is we're receiving a staff recommendation to revert the budget to keep the line items. And what could you refresh our memory of what amount would then be in the contingency line item? So what's your proposed revision to the budget?
So I would keep it as originally proposed. Contingency budget line item stays with $100,000 as it has been for the last 3 or 4 years. The environmental budget line item stays as $125,000. And with that, I also want maybe to have Warren and Madison's, opinion, if we are going, because we don't know, we might be spending all those money on something. They might be, in the works for something, because I know recently they asked me how much money they have, in their budget line item. And, the repair and maintenance of the nobody dorm should stay at $180,000, which I know it's very high. But, as you mentioned last time, the idea of budgeting that high was because we didn't know if we're gonna hire an outsourced firm to manage it and do all the things that, right now that our maintenance department is doing. And since we didn't have a full, season, with employees, since we had just couple moved in the middle of August, we still don't know how much of that we might spend. And again, as you mentioned, doesn't matter if the money in contingency or the other two budget line items, if they don't get spent, it's just gonna be calculated into our retained earnings.
So, the delta that we're really looking at is a $305,000 difference, whether it gets added to the contingency or stays in the other line items. And that's, I know you had some input. The one that, the environmental at 125, I think is reasonable because there's projects that, I know one that I don't want to completely extend this meeting, but I've been wanting to bring up that we still really need to clean our catch basins.
Yes.
I think that would fall under that item, and the invasive species management. I'm not just trying to spend the money, but I think that there is environmental stewardship that, that amount. The 180 for the dorm, a brand new dorm or repairs, that gives me concern to your point that the FinCom's gonna look at that and say, you have a brand new building. What do you need $180,000 for? Like, and then, so that's just, as we're continuing this discussion. I could see revising this, and again, it's open to discussion. Well, Madison, what did you want to add on this?
The environment.
To support the environmental for 125?
Yes, and part of my reason of that is that environmental budget not only is supporting vegetation management and invasive species, but as I'm continuing to learn about the job here and bring on more projects and improve what we can do with, say, noise abatement or our PFAS, like communications and technical abilities, that money, like, yes, I don't know an exact amount on some of these projects yet, but I think, as Maria said, just keeping it as is and being able to put it in the community earnings is the right choice. Just as an example, I have spoken to Brett Trowbridge from VHB. He is our lead consultant for vegetation management. And so we spoke with him about managing invasive species. And for us, this invasive species management project alone is standalone. It is not tied to any of our obligations under this capital improvement projects. And so, when we talked to him, we still definitely need a solid number that we would get quoted from, say, either Wilkinson or another invasive species subcontract of them. But we were thinking that this would probably be a 3-year task order, for instance, and that to keep this treatment, just to keep it, I guess, clean in a way, we would want to have the trained staff from, say, Wilkinson or whichever vendor we end up going with to do a stem treatment and do the herbicide treatment rather than using our own staff.
So, right, so there's environmental perhaps needs on that. I think that as we revisit this, and this is open to everybody, I'm as concerned with 180,000 in the dorm budget as I am with 300 and something in the contingency. And I'm wondering if those are the numbers maybe we want to move around. Perhaps we consider leaving, we're shooting from the hip here a bit, no matter what, but in trying to say 200, put 200 move 100 to contingency at 200 and keep 80 at the dorm. And then leave the environmental. So you're still justifying an increase in contingency on the basis that we're being responsible. We have a brand new building that might need some unknown works this year, and so hopefully we don't, but maybe if things come up, are we mowing the grass, are we paying someone to do that, are we finding that you don't have the staff because of the other stuff, I mean. So perhaps that's a bit of a meet in the middle, and I'd be interested to hear sort of both sides of that approach.
What do you think, Maria?
I think that's very reasonable and it will be much easier to explain regarding the contingency budget line.
Politically deal with the FinCom. The FinCom. Yes,
Well,
to
we all-
some degree. I'd rather leave it as her judgment as to how this is handled.
I think it's an in-between. I think that it's you know, it's a fair point to, you know, not have a number that's not defensible, but also just to not, we don't want to play shell games. We want to have a budget that represents what we believe we're gonna spend, but you have this problem in municipal where you want to have a rainy day, but you don't want to perceive as slush. And what's that? Where is that line? So, like,
if I've got my manager hat on and I've got department heads coming to me with their budgets for what they need next year. One of my first questions is gonna be, well, what did you spend last year? And why do you need this money before? So if we start to look at what was spent last year on, don't want to pick on medicine, but on environmental or on the dorm project, my question is going to be, well, why is it jumping up so much this year? And if the response is, well, we might do something, or in case something breaks in our new dorm, my response is going to be, well, that's why we've got a contingency fund, because these things cannot be moved from out of contingency, and you have that flexibility. And just the second point where we talk about politics, I think everybody's aware how contentious the expense of the dorm was to build. And I think we're kind of putting a target on our backs if we look like we're asking for even more money for that. If we have to mow the lawn, if we have to fix something, I think that's what contingency is for. You move money from it. But, you know, we may have a difference of opinion in the room, but those are my thoughts.
And I must say that when we start the budget process, specifically now for fiscal 27, when we had that a month ago, I reached out to all department heads, and some of them, they had increased requests, but I didn't take them into consideration based on what they spent last year. So that's why majority of our budget line items, they stayed as they are, and I didn't increase a lot of them. But the maintenance department, the security, they all came, operations, they all came to me with some increases for this and that. They're thinking to do maybe that or purchase this, and that's my starting point. That's what I always do. I look what they spent last year. I saw that they didn't spend even close to what we budgeted, so I budget the same. I roll over the same budget line item, and that's how we usually do it. And then regarding the dorm, I totally understand that's a very high number, and we can definitely decrease it when we budget for 28. It's just because of the timing of it right now, and we need to be done with 27 now in January, pretty much. The one goes in February, just because of the timing. And I can't know, but and you'll see it in the upcoming warrants that we just had a bill for almost $8,000 for something for the dorm. I mean, things come up. It's not just mowing the lawn or, but we also pay out of this account for pest control or, I cannot think of it right now, but we do pay for random items for that budget line item.
so it stays the same, there's a motion to change it. Sort of where we're at.
What do you want to do, Maria?
I'll be very comfortable if we can leave $80,000 in the repair and maintenance and nobody, and make contingency 200,000 and leave environmental with the 125,000. Give a chance, since this is a brand new budget line item that it was just added in this fiscal year, give a chance to Madison and Warren to work something up. Maybe leave it for next year since because of the timeline, we have to. And then, when we, next year, when we meet in fall and we talk about 28, we can, if they haven't spent it, we just, we get rid of it or, we move to contingency or whatever, however the commission feels like, at that point. But I think, that would be a good idea to do, just decrease the repair maintenance of the nobody are done.
Everybody feel it's our motion.
I like the motion to adopt the. Just over.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. So, thank you. I think it's a good discussion. I think it's no
That's
good
good.
points. We'll have to see how FinCom goes on it, but I think that working through these things, I have to agree with the target comment. You know, maybe still maybe there, but at least house. That's one point. So, is there any further, Mr. Smith?
Just the RFP and the ops updates, they're pretty brief. Just we got the boarding ramps, RFPs were due yesterday. We got 2 bids on that. Currently reviewing those. I had already mentioned the flat roof RFPs should be going out on December 15th. TSA got 2 new cat machines podium at the 2 new cat machine podiums installed at the front of the checkpoint, which is great to see. We had our annual snow and ice meeting, FAA required snow and ice meeting just a couple weeks ago for this upcoming weather season. Tense down. Collective bargaining, I mentioned the kickoff meeting is scheduled for next week, Wednesday. And then last thing I've got in relation to Mr. Levitt's question about airport housing. I've been working with HR on compiling a housing needs questionnaire. I sent that to all the staff with a deadline for tomorrow. I have about 80 to 90% responses back. So once I get those back, I'll analyze that data and I'll share that with all the commissioners. So we're really close to having that done. That's all that I have.
Okay. Commissioners' comments.
Good one.
Yeah.
Runway 24, when I'm gonna pay that? 2 years, 3 years, one day.
Yeah, it's going on the Capcom next year. Is you're talking for the runway reconstruct
Yeah, in the working.
yeah. So that's in next year's Capcom ask.
I think it's a 28
28.
project, but
Project.
more likely at 29 or 30.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if, I know there's a big demand for additional hangar space for GA, and a lot of guys, and I was just curious if we can. Not just right away, I know you're busy, but just kind of work that in so we can, as that's getting done, we can, I think it's over in that area, right?
Yeah, by the old pit,
Right,
by Coffin's old pit.
Right.
Designated.
so we're gonna run 2-4 beyond down that way and put the hangars there, all right?
I think the
Yeah,
initial
just
one was
gas.
another row of T hangers next to the existing T hangers.
Oh,
And then we work
correct.
around the corner by the post
That's
office.
correct.
All right.
That's, yeah, part of the best part.
No, yeah, I guess I was just trying to reach out for all of that, another little thing, so we
Yeah.
can try to push a RFP out or something.
Preston, didn't we have a CI, we already have future
We do,
year
I don't remember
CIP.
where it's
I
at.
don't remember which year it is, we could definitely look it up, but there,
Yeah.
we have it on our CIP list for future years.
For the additional team.
The 14, is that what it is?
Yes.
The 14 complex of hangars?
Yeah, I don't know if it could be that big, but that was the proportion.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's probably like 29.
But we can,
Yeah.
I thought about that too, trying to push that up.
That's
We
okay.
can, yes.
Anybody else? Is there any public, go ahead, Commissioner Levitt.
I want to circle back to something I brought up at the last meeting, and we've had some communications with Warren about it. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this municipal budget restriction we have that's forcing us to split the hard stands into a spring project and a fall project, which if we didn't have those restrictions, it would be a no-brainer to do it all at once. I'm just trying to understand, if we did it all at once, what would be the total cost? As I understand it, we're going to spend 500 now, we're going to spend another 900 later. So we're at 1.4. But just ballpark, if we went out in the spring and did all of it, I'm trying to quantify the inefficiency that that's being imposed upon us.
And I gave you a number, I think it was 600,000 was for the gate 2, including the administration costs. And that includes the gate 1 cost. But we still have some more improvements to gate 2 alpha that need to be included, as well as, of course, the administration costs for the gate 1 project. I mean, ballpark, you're probably looking at right at around $1 million. I would say, be safe, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe 1.1 million.
So it's gonna cost us 1.4 to split it. If we did it all at once, it would be 1. Roughly. 1.
We didn't, so the original, when it was clear that it's gonna cost us more than $500,000, we reach out to our consultants and reach Lasdin, and they gave us that number that, it will be around 1.4 before we had any, other conversations, and before we knew that it's gonna be $610,000. So I think it doesn't mean necessarily it's gonna cost us 1.4, hopefully cost us less. But at that time we decided we already put, because of the timing again, in August, we had to put all our requests to Capcom. That was the deadline for supplemental.
I totally understand
Yeah.
that, so I'm not trying to get down into
Yeah.
the weeds too much
So
where it is.
so we're
It's
hoping
just-
it's not gonna cost us 1.4.
But it would obviously be, you're mobilizing and you're doing the job all at once, it's gonna cost less than splitting up twice. So is it a 300K bump? Is that a good ballpark number?
It could be, and I can reach out to MJ and just get them, give me kind of an estimate. I mean, just from the numbers they've given me, that's the best estimate I can kind of visualize. But yeah, I'll ask MJ and I'll see if they can give me a more solid, true number.
And then the second part of that question, by delaying it, you indicated that we're doing this so that we don't dig ruts into our ramp. And we're gonna operate this summer without part of it done. So are we going to, in addition, be incurring more ramp damage because we didn't do both of them in the spring?
So not necessarily, no, and what we proposed to the airlines is currently gate 7, which is concreted, right? That's been our overflow gate. We are proposing this spring to swap gate 1 and gate 7. So we're gonna have like Delta Airlines operate out of gate 7 as their true gate. So basically the overflow gate will be gate 1. That's only in the event of emergency if they're an E-190 or a smaller aircraft. The A220s can't fit on 1 or 7 regardless because of the tail size and the hangers that kind of hang at the end of runway 33. So it kind of buys us a little bit of time over the summer that gate 1 will not be utilized to hardly any extent as gate 7 has been in years past. So the amount of running is going to lessen because there just won't be an aircraft sitting on gate 1 as often as we've had in times past. So,
and then my last question, I promise, by not doing it in the spring, is it causing any of the airlines not to upgauge?
No.
So, okay.
No, it won't cause any issues there.
And I think to Commissioner Levis' point, the question is highlighting the inefficiency of municipal operation that doesn't allow us to go forward. And how do we get through that? But again, if the finance director kind of down this, he's bound, not so much more, but he's bound not to sign that contract, and the 1.4 is so that we don't end up in that, so we don't end up a penny under that stops the project. So working what we have, I think. I don't think any of us really like it, but that's how you guys, I feel like you need to get it done as opposed to waiting. You know, I support with you for how you think we have to do it, even if it costs, if it's not efficient, unfortunately. Anything else? No comments, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Please-
Aye.
Aye. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Phil, the hangers is in fiscal 28.
28.
Yeah, that's why we put it right now.
Oh, so we'll go to,
Hanger
we'll put
complex.
together